Well, with permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll make a statement on the Israel-Iran conflict. Since I last updated the House, the United States has struck 3 Iranian nuclear sites at Esfahan, Natanz and Fordo. Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth has said their action was intentionally limited. Britain was not involved in these strikes, just as Britain was not involved in Israel's operations. But Britain has long had concerns about Iran's nuclear programme. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. The United States has now taken action to alleviate that threat. A nuclear-armed Iran would endanger the immediate region and threaten the global community. This is a perilous moment in the Middle East, Madam Deputy Speaker. Waves of strikes between Israel and Iran have now lasted for 10 days, continuing overnight. I know the whole House will have in their thoughts the many civilians impacted by the fighting. I can confirm today this includes 1 British national injured in Israel. We've reached out to offer consular support. Madam Deputy Speaker, Iran has consistently failed to reassure the world that it was not pursuing a nuclear weapon. The House will recall Prime Minister Gordon Brown calling out Iran for perpetrating serial deception over years after exposure of the fortified Fordo nuclear site. Today, their enriched uranium stockpile is 40 times the JCPOA limit. Iran is enriching at 60%. Typically, a commercial nuclear reactor like that at Sizewell operates with uranium enriched at between 3 and 5%. Iran lacks any civilian justification for this level of nuclear activity, and the International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors has declared Iran in breach of their nuclear non-proliferation obligations. Mr. Speaker, as we respond to this fast-moving situation, our first priority remains the welfare of British nationals in Iran and Israel, and our staff on the ground. Our crisis teams in London and the region have been working round the clock. Israel has put restrictions on its airspace since Friday the 13th of June. The British Embassy in Tel Aviv and British Consulate in Jerusalem are open. All our diplomats remain in place, supporting British nationals. And we have bolstered the embassy in Tel Aviv with a rapid deployment team from the UK. We have been working closely with the Israeli authorities to prepare flights to evacuate vulnerable British nationals and their dependents. Yesterday, we launched a booking portal for British nationals. Today, as soon as it was possible to enter airspace. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can confirm to the House that a Royal Air Force A400 has flown in to Tel Aviv and taken 63 British nationals and their dependents to Cyprus, from where they will be brought home this evening. Further flights will follow in the coming days, security allowing. We will prioritise those with greatest need and contact those allocated a seat directly. We will send updates on future flights to all British nationals registered with the Foreign Office, and I encourage all British nationals still in Israel and the occupied territories to register their presence so they receive our updates. These British nationals should follow instructions from the Israeli authorities. International land border crossings to Jordan and Egypt are open, and commercial flights continue from both those countries. Consular teams are on hand to assist British nationals who have crossed the border. In Iran, airspace remains closed and there has been a near total internet shutdown. Due to the security situation, we took the precautionary step last Friday of temporarily withdrawing our staff from Iran. The embassy is operating remotely, though our ability to support British nationals still in Iran is extremely limited. The House will know that the Foreign Office has advised against travel to Iran since 2019. those seeking to cross Iran's land borders can contact the FCDO for assistance, including with additional paperwork. And British nationals in the wider region should also closely follow our travel advice. Mr. Speaker, following a US security alert for their nationals in Qatar, out of an abundance of caution, we now recommend that British nationals in Qatar shelter in place until further notice. Alongside our consular teams, Mr. Speaker, our diplomats are fully engaged in trying to end this crisis. We can and we must find a negotiated solution. The window has narrowed, but the risks of further escalation are so great and the costs so considerable for Britain and all in the region that this is the government's priority. We don't yet know precisely how far the US strikes have set back Iran's nuclear program, but there remains the need for a durable diplomatic solution. Strikes cannot destroy the knowledge Iran has acquired over several decades, nor any regime ambition to deploy that knowledge to build a nuclear weapon. That's why we've been working so intensively with the new US administration to reach a new agreement with Iran. Iran and President Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, held 5 rounds of negotiations. Britain joined France and Germany in 7 rounds of engagements with Iran as well. Even after the Israeli strikes, I travelled to Washington and then Geneva last week, meeting in the White House with Secretary Rubio and Witkoff. And then sitting opposite Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi in several hours of talks, pushing for Iran to accept the diplomatic off-ramp. And directly after the US strikes, we've been at the heart of a collective drive with partners to get back to negotiations. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has spoken to President Trump. I have spoken to Marco Rubio and Israeli Foreign Minister Saar. We have both been in touch with European and Middle Eastern partners. And this was why I spoke again to Minister Araghchi yesterday as well. My message for Tehran was clear. Take the off-ramp, dial this thing down, and negotiate with the United States seriously and immediately. The alternative is an even more destructive and far-reaching conflict which could have unpredictable consequences. Mr. Speaker, the situation presents serious risks to British interests in the region. Having moved in additional assets on a precautionary basis, force protection is at its highest levels. Be in no doubt, we are prepared to defend our personnel, our assets, and those of our allies and partners. We are closely monitoring how energy markets are responding to the conflict, and we have been extremely clear with the Iranians. Any action to blockade the Straits of Hormuz would be a monumental act of economic self-harm, making a diplomatic solution even harder. Mr. Speaker, we are also maintaining sharp focus on other conflicts in the region. First and foremost, the catastrophic plight of Gazans and the ongoing ordeal of the hostages and their loved ones, all fearing that this war leaves them forgotten. Today I met Ali Sharabi, held in chains by Iranian-backed terrorists, who was released from Hamas captivity only to discover they had murdered his family. Last week, Israeli Defense Forces recovered the bodies of 2 hostages, as well as that of Shai Levinson, an Israeli and British family killed on October the 7th, which Hamas has been cruelly keeping from their loved ones. And Palestinian civilians, 500,000 facing starvation, over 400 reportedly killed in recent weeks trying to access food, while Gazan hospitals have had to stop services vital for childbirth and emergency surgeries. This is appalling, Mr. Speaker. It's unacceptable and it must finally end. The Israeli government must lift aid restrictions, Hamas must release all the hostages, an immediate ceasefire has never been more urgent. Mr. Speaker, the consequences of the current situation are hard to predict. History can offer us no guide after events unprecedented in the region. The government has sought to react quickly to the twists and turns of recent weeks while maintaining focus on where British interests lie. A lasting end to Iran's nuclear programme, a de-escalation of tensions, and security for our people across the region. We will continue to persevere with diplomacy. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Dame Priti Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, the IAEA produced a report that was damning on the Iranian regime. Iran was not cooperating, breaching its obligations, and had over 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, far beyond any level needed for a civilian nuclear program, and enough material to create at least 9 nuclear devices. Their nuclear facilities are buried deep underground to hide their program, and all this from a despotic, authoritarian regime that represses and tortures its own people. It's committed to the annihilation of Israel, the world's only Jewish state, and is responsible for so much of the suffering in the region through its sponsorship of terrorist proxies. It is supporting Putin in its illegal war against Ukraine and is involved in plots and activities that undermine our national security here at home on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, it is for these reasons and many, many more that the Iranian regime must never be allowed to have nuclear weapons. That is why we stand with those working to stop them. As His Majesty's opposition, the House will know that we will always put the defence and security of our country first. And that's why we will work constructively with the government to secure the protection of British people and our national interests. We will support the government when they're doing the right thing, but also question, challenge and press ministers to go further when we think more needs to be done to safeguard our interests. It is in that spirit of constructive scrutiny, in the national interest, that I put these questions and points to the Foreign Secretary. Firstly, British nationals and dual nationals continue to be stranded in Israel and the Middle East due to airbase closures. Now, I've written to the Foreign Secretary about this matter and note the progress with today's flight, and I do want to thank the Foreign Office for the work they've been doing with many families who I've been in touch with as well, who have been able to get on that flight today. So can the Foreign Secretary tell us how many British nationals may need to be repatriated? What resources are being deployed to support those efforts? Is there enough capacity to match the numbers that is needed to leave? And why does it seem that the US and other European countries were ahead of us in their operational planning to bring back their citizens? The Foreign Secretary has mentioned the US Embassy advice, and now he's given advice to British nationals in Qatar today. Will there be any further notifications for other British nationals in GCC states? Second, on Iran's nuclear programme, the Foreign Secretary on radio this morning could not say how effective the weekend strikes were, and I understand that will take time to get information. But if more strikes are planned to further degrade Iran's nuclear capacities, will the government consider supporting these? The government has not taken a clear position on the actions that the US and Israel have taken, but we have seen reports of the apparent legal advice from the Attorney General cautioning against UK involvement. And while I appreciate that the Foreign Secretary cannot comment on any legal advice, does the government have a position on the lawfulness of these strikes? And does he welcome the ends as well as the means to achieve this? Does he share my cynicism about Iran's attempt to cloak itself in the UN Charter? That's the same UN Charter it has undermined with its brutality for decades. And can the Foreign Secretary confirm if the US will be permitted to take action from Diego Garcia should future strikes on Iran be needed or actions to defend Israel? Or does the government think that there are legal barriers to the US in doing so? Third, with heightened tensions in the region, can the Foreign Secretary give an update on what further steps are being undertaken to safeguard British military assets in the region and our partners from any unwise military action taken by the Iranian regime? And I say this considering the reports that we heard about over the weekend with the arrest of a suspected Iranian spy plot targeting our base in Cyprus. Are we now stepping up efforts to protect bases? Fourth, what steps are being taken across government and with our police, counter-terrorism, security services to reassess the domestic threat levels? The Foreign Secretary cannot go into operational details, so can he give assurance on the robust action and disruptions to any potential Iran-backed plots that are underway? He mentioned, and rightly so, the issue of Gaza and the fact that we absolutely must work together in terms of ensuring that humanitarian aid gets to people desperately in need of aid. Can the Foreign Secretary update us on what steps he's been taking to engage with Israel to get more aid into Gaza? And does he agree that Iran must be weakened to end their ability to sponsor Hamas and other terrorists in the region?
Foreign Secretary.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Speaker, to the tone and the cooperative context in which the Honourable Lady has made her remark, and quite rightly she has a number of questions which I will attempt to answer. But let me just begin by saying, fundamentally, we are in agreement that Iran and the regime in Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, and all of our efforts are designed to ensure that that is the case. And the whole House will understand that this is not just about Iran, the region and global security. It is because we have to remain steadfast in our commitment to not see nuclear proliferation. And if Iran got a nuclear weapon, clearly there would be others in the region that would seek to follow. And so it's a sober commitment that really begins 80 years ago that we must see to completion in relation of their ambitions. She asks about the British nationals in Israel. There are just over 4,000 British nationals that have registered their interests following our appeal last week. And we would estimate that somewhere between 15 to 25% of them indicate, this is following the pattern in previous crises in Israel and in the region, take up the offer of British assistance to leave. As she knows, the airspace has been closed, and so that offer up until this point was about getting them to the border. But I'm very pleased that that flight has landed and taken off. We hope to work with the Israeli government on further flights in the area. My understanding is that there has been a military plane that the Americans have put on for their citizens from Israel, but she will understand the uniqueness of the relationship that the United States has with America that facilitated that opening up, and I'm very pleased that we have been able to garner that same agreement today with the Israeli government. This is an ongoing and fast-moving situation. She has heard what I have advised British nationals in Qatar today, and of course we keep this under close review, and there may need to be further updates over the course of the next few days. It was important that I was in Washington, D.C., sitting with the US administration, and in that meeting with Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff last week, it was very clear to me that all options were on the table, and President Trump had those options in front of us. I, of course, discussed with them in detail the trip that I would be making alongside my French, German, and the European High Representative in Geneva, and they were keen and hopeful that that might be successful. It was not successful, but we continue to press the Iranians to take the off-ramp and get into those negotiations with the United States and with the E3 to ensure that they are in compliance. She asks about the legal advice. That must rightly be a matter for the US government in relation to their action. And I'm pleased that she mentioned the ministerial code. She will know that Section 213 of the ministerial code prevents those of us in government, and she has been in government in the past, discussing legal advice so that government can operate in the appropriate way. But I would say to her, this was not our action. We have been clear that we were not involved. She asked also whether we had any request from the US government. We did not get such a request, but we were notified before the action took place. She asked also about state threats, and it is right to say that we have thwarted 20 such state threats since 2022 in this country, and she will know, including the highest tier that we put Iran on for national interference, that we take the threats from Iran very seriously, and we are reviewing and will come forward with legislation in the coming months in relation to the gaps that Sir John Hall found in how we deal with state threats in our country.